Does that look good, or this one?
This looks great.
All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Live First Conversations. Really excited to be here today. Let me take a look at my LinkedIn and join to see. Hold on. Maybe a delay.
I think we're live, Miguel.
I think we are. Okay, here we go. All right, well, welcome to Live First Conversations. This has been a journey for me. I mean, it's a couple of months ago. I didn't expect that I would be starting this. And Julian, I'm really humbled and honored that you were willing to say yes and be the first one here on the interview series.
Yeah, Miguel. I mean, thanks for having me. I've been thinking about this conversation all week. Firstly, because I used to interview. I think I've run over 400 interviews, so I know how it feels to be on the other side, and live streams and timings and all of that. So it's always a journey, and I think that's what it's about, right? Coming into this conversation, I was thinking, what do I really want to share? And I'm sure you'll have great questions, but how you're framing this whole interview series to me is very exciting, because that's what my work has evolved to be with leaders and founders. It's really all about how we redefine success and how we redefine what wealth really is, right? And I think the most successful people I know, for them, it always comes back to relationship choices, relationship freedom, and the relationship they have with themselves.
Yeah. And that's exactly what this is about. I mean, Live First Conversations is really about exploring what is possible when wealth is aligned with our values, with what's important. It's an identity shift. And there's actually a story that I want you to talk about from an identity shift perspective and what you went through. You shared that story with me when we first met. You were sitting in an office and you got to see what you've built, and there was this big shift in you. And part of the reason I wanted to create this is because I feel like there's a larger audience out there that is either going through or has gone through a similar event, which is, again, this identity shift, this questioning, is this all worth it? Is there a better way of earning money, of living life, of whatever it is? For a lot of us, wealth and legacy and all of that seems like it's arriving at a certain destination. But then for those people who've gotten there to one degree or another, sometimes it starts to feel maybe hollow. It starts to feel empty. It starts to feel like maybe you're living somebody else's version of what success and wealth feels like. And so that's what this interview series is really about. It's talking to real people with real stories, because I know there's a lot of other people out there that are questioning the same things. And sometimes they feel alone. They feel like, well, maybe, I don't know if anybody, maybe I'm overcomplicating the situation and I should just be content, right? I've made it. But there's so much opportunity of what can happen when we go beyond just the, living life on somebody else's terms and really giving our fullest gifts, right? And so, Julian, I wanted to start with, first of all, tell us a little bit about you. I mean, what are you focusing on now? And then we can kind of take us through this journey of what happened to shift that, because there was a major shift in your world.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, great setup here, Miguel. And I think, to summarize what I'm hearing you say, it's about building wealth without sacrificing who you are, right? Because a lot of people run this paradigm where it's like, well, sure, I'll get to love everything about life later once I've gotten to this destination, right? And so that's exactly what to address here. I mean, about myself a little bit more, born and raised in Germany, lived abroad though since I'm 15, on 3 different continents. My last chapter was 12 years Vancouver Island, Victoria, Canada, and then about a year ago, I moved to Austin, Texas. I've worked primarily as an event producer in my early years, first with BMW and Nike, then ran my own event studio for a couple of years, and then transitioned kind of from that into working with founders, with startups, with CEOs. First, help them with general communication, and was a director of communications in a few companies. Also fundraising rounds, something that playfully kind of came to me, to be very honest. And from there, I realized, what I really love is just supporting founders, be a strategic partner, be in their corner for their journey, for who they're becoming and who their company is becoming. And so the last 8 years, as I mentioned earlier, I've run a podcast for 7 years out of those 8. Stopped it after 360 interviews under that label called Green Planet, Blue Planet, but also hosted different interviews under a venture capital think tank, as well as another label called Better Worlds, really focused on entrepreneurs and founders that are changing the world as we know it and creating a more beautiful world that is possible, that our heart knows is possible, but that is actually possible right now. And I've learned a lot from that. Hand in hand with that, I've advised and worked with thousands of founders, either at events, in group programs, or in one-on-one programs. And it lights me up. That's the short of it. It lights me up to have a relationship first focus in my profession. And in the season I'm in right now, I became a father a year ago. I got married. I'm in love. I live in outside of Austin, Texas. In the season I'm in right now, I'm really realizing founders and CEOs that are at a transition point. Either they're raising capital or they are looking to transition out of their company. They're having plans to exit their company.
Right.
People that are at that threshold, that is the most exciting for me to work with. It's the most exciting chapter. When someone is going through change or crossing a threshold, a lot is possible. It's that time in one's life where we usually question everything, and we usually look for more than just a big payout. We usually look for a change in lifestyle. And so that's when I love to be in people's lives, and I love to kind of, support them and to understand that the freedom we all are looking for is lived through relationships. And it is determined by who gets access to you, your energy, your vision, and your mission. And when we primarily understand that all life is built on relationships, with self, with creator, with God, with others, right? With our family, with the circles we're in, and also with who we actually deliberately and politely don't have relationships with. Because very often it's just all by circumstance. Oh yeah, we work together. Oh yeah, that person is just part of they're in my neighborhood or whatever. And I think it's very important to have healthy boundaries. And we can talk more about agreements and expectations a little later, but to really have a life that's based on agreements versus expectations.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, it sounds like since you've started this journey, you've gone through a lot of different changes. You've taken what you've learned working with big companies and really bringing that to the masses, the founders, really understanding what they're going through from an exit standpoint, the options they have available. What I'm curious to kind of get on is let's take a few steps back, because there's a pivotal moment, and I feel like it's important for just to provide context, because the Julian you are now, would you agree to say to some sort of degree, is not the same? Well, there's been a major shift from the Julian you are now to the Julian you were when you were in that corporate environment.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think we all continuously change throughout the journey of life, and embracing that is just
absolutely
a big part of it. Go ahead.
What happened? Because I want people to kind of hear that story of.
I'll tell you the story.
Yeah. What's that? What happened there?
Well, I'll give you a story to one of the BMW days. This is like a long time ago. So first up, it's already traveled to. I mean, man, at this point, I traveled to over 60 countries. But at early age, I was able to travel internationally. And so I kind of had a different dream for my life than to work for these big Fortune 500 companies. But I ended up doing it anyway, which looking back, it was like me, as you already said this a couple minutes ago, it was like me living someone else's dream. Right? It was like me following the path that I always call it the German dream because I was born and raised in Germany. So you go to state-paid university, and then you end up at a Fortune 500 company. But what happened specifically in the event production space, like, I was really blessed to, because I learned to speak different languages really early. I was really blessed to be put into these multicultural event setups where being the communicator between different teams was one of my main skills. And I was at an event. It was a winter event. It was, I think, in the Alps, either in Austria or Switzerland. We were presenting probably one of the X5, X3 experiences, and those events were really fun. They were next to biathlon sporting events, so thousands and thousands of people coming to see these sporting events. And then there's this big BMW setup, and if you could experience the all-wheel drive and a little driving experience. And so one of those days, my boss's boss was scheduled to arrive. And as you can imagine, in a corporate hierarchy, if the boss's boss is going to arrive, everyone's a little bit, antsy, like, oh my God, 2:00, we have to be ready. And so for one, like, that already felt a little janky or wobbly to me. But then an outrageous thing happened, man, where my boss at the time looked at the main car we exhibited, which was like 99.8% perfectly clean. And, his wires must have been crossed or something. And he's like, you got to repolish this car, everyone. So you got a whole team of us to like get hands on. And what he did was he opened several bottles of bottled water and poured them over this car. And it was like, use the water, polish the car. It needs to be spick and span and perfect. You can imagine, like, probably it was a fellow German guy, like, super on it. And I was just like, WTF? Like, what is happening here right now? We are literally, like, I'm spending the best energy I have. Like, it's always the best years we have, no matter what year it is. But I'm spending the best energy I have to support, like, this clownery to like, I'm just gonna just spell it out how I felt about it, right?
Yeah.
To like please someone else's ego so that he's gonna look good in front of someone else about a material thing, wasting drinking water. Yeah. Now, that might not have been as shocking to everyone as it was to me in that moment, but it just felt like one of the dumbest things I've ever witnessed. And the weird thing was that in that moment, there was very little I could do not to participate. Right. And so actually, it took a little bit longer until I quit my job with BMW events at the time. But that was one of those wake up call moments where I'm like, I'm giving my best energy to brands that do not care about my values. Now, don't get me wrong. I still think some of the cars look really fly, but that doesn't mean that I want to spend my time, my energy, my focus, my relationships with building something that is inherently kind of off center. And so it was one of those first moments where it's like, I don't actually belong here. I will have to make steps that allow me to unapologetically be me and be who I am and learn to succeed in that way.
How did that feel? Being in that position where you recognize this isn't where I want to be, right? Because I mean, imagine you didn't spend 2 years in that career. This was several years.
Well, I did, but it was a while. It was exactly 2 years. Funny that you mentioned.
Oh,
that. Yeah.
Well, what I'm getting at is you spent equity, time, and how did that feel being in this position where there's kind of like it's a pivotal moment, right? You're recognizing this isn't for me. This isn't where I want to be, and you said something. I need to take these steps, and I'm asking that question because. For people listening in or who will watch this, there's people who might be feeling like that now. And what happened taking those steps? Was it courage? Was it clarity? Was it authenticity that you stepped into? How did that feel?
Right. Like, I mean, the first feeling, the feeling of upset or the feeling of like WTF, like what the fuck, I'm just gonna swear. I'm not sure if that's okay on this live stream, but like that's how it feels, right? That's step number one. Yeah. And then it did take me not a full 2 years because that happened like a year and a bit into it, took me only a couple months until I'm like, okay, I'm like out of it for sure. I mean, the hold up is usually money and logistics, right?
Right.
Most of us are golden handcuffed to a circumstance that we find tolerable. But the reality for me was the clarity happened in that moment. Okay, this has an expiration date on it for Julian. I'm gonna have to move on. That was the clarity. But then between the clarity and acting on it, you know, a few more months and actually a whole other event tour that brought me to Canada. You know, I was actually project manager on an event tour afterwards that brought me to Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver for a month each. And then at the end of that, I arrived in Vancouver. I mean, this is like way back, 2012, 13 years at this point. I realized the opportunity, the window of opportunity opened. And I quit at the end of the tour. So I fulfilled the work, you know, I delivered. I didn't just like quit halfway through. I delivered and then said, that's it though. I'm not even going to fly back home. I'm going to stay here for a while. So what opened was a new window of opportunity. And I want to make this point really clear. There was no clear roadmap. What next? There was no figured the path out already. Therefore now I'm safe. And jumping without the safety net actually is what really worked for me. It might not work for everyone. For a lot of people, they really need to have kind of this mental framework ready. But, you know, mixed with the clarity of understanding my values are not being met here. When the window of opportunity opens, I will jump. It was a very easy thing ultimately to act consequentially on my inner values. And so I think that's maybe the takeaway, a nugget of wisdom here for people is understand your inner hierarchy of needs, understand your inner hierarchy of values. You know, maybe even inspired from this conversation, make a list of your values, make a list of what really matters to you, make a list of the relationships that matter to you. And then if they are not currently met in the world you're living, look for the opportunity when to transition into the next phase, right? It doesn't have to be cold turkey. It doesn't have to be right here, right now with no safety net. But for some of you, it can be. For me, it definitely was a pretty drastic decision. I actually did a sabbatical after. I did 6 months of doing a whole lot of nothing, which was very important for me to actually feel inspired again to do the next thing, which was I opened an event space on Vancouver Island for a couple of years.
Yeah. Wow. And I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think that's one of the things that holds people up from, you know, and I've been here before, so I can say this from a place of a kind of understanding what it's like to be in a position where you've arrived somewhere, and sometimes it's not as drastic as, you know, I have to make a life-changing, a 180-degree change in my career. But maybe it's a 180-degree change in the direction of where I was going with my career, or maybe the way that I'm showing up. And for some people, like you said, for some people it's easy, not easy, but it becomes clearer to say, this isn't right for me. I got to move in this other direction that feels right. Let me take a leap because it feels right. And other people, because of financial constraints, maybe they already have children, maybe it's maybe not as easy. But there is a roadmap. There is a process of being able to do that, right? I want to talk about something you mentioned. So there was an interview that you did with John Fullerton,
mm-hmm.
and you guys talked about regenerative economics. I found that really fascinating, and I thought it was appropriate to kind of talk about here because it really kind of gets back into this this theme of what does it really mean to build wealth, legacy in a different way, in a way that feels, well, and I'll let you kind of explain that, but what is this regenerative economics, aligning finances with living systems?
It's a big question, man. I love that you're asking it. One of my spiritual teachers on the path, he said to me, the banking system of the future is the banking system of the forest. It took me years to really grapple it. But basically, you know, we live in a world where, you know, we're not disconnected from nature. Nature is we're part of it, and it's a big part of the blueprint of this planet. The way I would describe it is, if you zoom out, the sun rises every day, but no person does anything for that to happen. So there seems to be a perfection at play for all of life to happen, an atmosphere to be present, and us to be able to breathe. There's a cosmic perfection at play. And so if you look at the forest banking system that's fueled through the root system, the mycelium, the interconnection between everything that's in the forest, there seems to be a perfection of how a collaborative and competitive economy is exchanging nutrients and values in the case of the forest. And so I think the regenerative economy is an economy that fundamentally looks at how we've created money and understands that we created it. So just like the federal bank can print more money, and every now and then they do, and that's a whole other conversation. We actually do have the power to amend and evolve the monetary systems we live in. But most people take that for granted. Now, John Fullerton, you mentioned, he's an expert at regenerative economics, and so I'd probably tell you, go listen to him or look at some of his writings or blog posts, or his Substack or whatever it might be, to really get into the detail of it. But ultimately, I think we're at a threshold in our society where we're realizing the way we've run the human society at large, on a Cartesian worldview, on an extractive worldview, it can only go so far. It can only go so far in the sense that it is inherently destructive to either the natural environment or our own health. And I want to actually focus on just two things that, no matter where you are on the spectrum, no matter which buzzwords work for you or don't work for you, that are pretty apparent and pretty visible. One is pollution, right? 100 years ago, there was no plastic in the oceans or in the rivers. Today, we have a bunch of plastic in the ocean and the rivers. Right. No bueno. Like, that's just not so good. And I think it's pretty easy to admit that and accept that's a problem. We've created a problem based on an extractive, growth at all cost mindset, right? And the same goes to human health, right? Now, some skeptics might want to debate me on that, but I don't know if the rate of cancer and the rate of autoimmune disease was ever at the stage that it's at right now, especially in a time when we have such evolved modern medicine. We still suffer from really, really dire situations when it comes to human health. And so these two are examples for how our current paradigm has an expiration date. Just like my time at working at BMW had an expiration date because it wasn't aligned with my values, right? The way we run the economic system of the society has an expiration date. But remember what I said first. I said first that we made it up in the first place. Yeah. And we should remember that. So that means the people that are ready for that, and often people point at cryptocurrency, they point at the blockchain and the evolution of technology, and blockchain ledgers allowing us to track transactions in a more transparent way, versus 50, 100 years ago paper-based ledgers, right? So the evolution of technology will enable us to do quite a bit of that as well. But basically, what if we were able to model our economic system increasingly after some biological processes that are present on this planet? And so I'll get full circle back to the foresting, the banking system of the forest, right? Is biomimicry is a design principle that is based on regeneration, which is a life principle. Like, regeneration is nothing we do, Miguel, right? Like, regeneration is something that's inherent in nature. Think of it like you cut your finger grows back tissue, closes the wound, and grows back skin, and 2 weeks later, you don't even see that you had a little cut. That's regeneration in action, right? And so I think it gets really, really exciting when we look at macroeconomic systems, and we look at biodiversity, and we look at bioregional health, because those are really the hot topics of our evolving consciousness. And so they matter in business, and there are a lot of businesses in those fields. They don't matter to everyone. And so for some people, this might be like over their heads, but I personally have a big passion for it and really love the work of people like John Fullerton, you mentioned, that are just positively obsessed with wanting to figure out what those next steps can be.
Yeah. And I think to a degree, I mean, the reason I brought that up is, to a degree, I'm sure that things like that, the gift economy, right, that you also talked about in one of your shows. How can we? I'm curious. How do these lessons? How does show up in the work that you do now, with founders? I mean, clearly it's shown up in your own personal life. I mean, that's. But how does this work show up with? We talk about the macro economy and systems that need to change at a larger scale. But does that mean that a founder or a company can't do anything to change that? It has to happen at the macro level.
No, it always happens at the micro level. Actually, this is
Exactly.
a great point, right? Like regeneration or sustainability or changing the world always starts with each individual tapping into their own value system. So I'll give you a very, very simple example, right? Most people build their life around their business. But what if you design your business around your life desires and your actual needs and the needs of your family and the needs of, the drinking water that we all are dependent on, or the soil, which is dependent it's largely how our health, is stays in homeostasis, right? So what if we actually flipped it? And actually the millennial generation, the Gen Z generation at large is just questioning the entire workplace for like, why have we created systems that are destroying our quality of life just so that we have an income, right? And so I'm not wanting to question the macro as much as I find it extremely interesting to look at those steps of evolution. Now, just to, again, zoom out a little bit, 30 years ago, before the internet was commonplace, none of this was really something the mainstream person could think about. We just didn't have the interconnectivity and the visibility of a lot of these things. Some advanced thinkers and some thought leaders probably hung out there already and way longer, of course. But the internet has brought an evolution of how we look at information. It has brought an evolution of creating insights into understanding who we are as a collective species. And so if I go into the very micro though from there, right, is like I recently had a client who restructured his entire company based on what we identified he was missing, which was, funnily enough, is the bedtime of his children every night. Now, that sounds like a small thing, right? But it's like, I'm a parent, you're a parent. It's huge. If you want to be around for that, you might want to figure out a way how to design your work life around it so that you're profitable, you're productive, you're effective. I don't like the word work-life balance as much. I think, it's just a buzzword, but you're in the driver's seat when it comes to designing your life.
Yeah.
You're the person choosing. You have the agency to choose. So if you don't know what matters to you, it's going to be really hard to choose that. But if you have a clear compass of what matters to you, if you understand, I do this eight slice pizza diagram with people. Like if you understand freedom as money, time, relationships, and purpose, so those are 4 slices. And if you understand health as mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual health, and you understand how you're doing on this self-assessment wheel of life, or I call it the 8 slice pizza. If you know how you're doing on that pizza diagram, that's a great starting place. Now, it's not going to solve any problems for you, but it's going to really highlight where in your individual life you want to put focus on, that then impacts how you operate with work, that then impacts who you are for the macro scale, right? And I mean, I could go on there, Miguel, but I'm curious, like, you're a parent, right? So tell me, like, how has that changed the way you look at all of this?
Significantly. I mean, when I started my business, I mean, as you're talking, I'm like, oh my God. I mean, I resonate with so much of this, and I hope other people do too. When I started the business, obviously I didn't have kids. We're talking back in 2012. And my idea of success was working 100 and 120 hours a week, building the business. I thought that I wanted to build, an enterprise. Had close to 300 clients. Was doing well financially, but I was working weekends. I was working Fridays, and it was very much the opposite of what you talked about, where my calendar prioritized my work, and then I would try to squeeze in my life around that. I can't. Even if I stopped working at 6 p.m. and I was supposed to make it to dinner with some friends at 7, but the meeting ended up lasting a little longer, I skipped the dinner, right? I mean, I prioritized work. But the biggest shift having kids was realizing that what I wanted wasn't this big empire of having employees and all these responsibilities. I started realizing, and I'm not going to say that I learned this right away as a head kid. It took me probably 2 years or 3 years to really mold myself into this fatherly role. But eventually I started kind of reflecting and thinking, that's not what I want. And I cut my book of business down from 300 clients to about around 40 clients, kind of just a fresh start, and building more intentionally from there, where I decided, I remember asking myself, I wonder what it's going to be like if I start planning my personal life first and then try to fit my work around it. And I'll never forget, I was in the office, it was like 6 p.m. There was another advisor who routinely was in the office until about 7 o'clock at night. And we're both there, kind of water cooling talk. And I told him, starting tomorrow, I'm going to start going to the gym every day at like 11 or noon. He's like, during lunchtime? And I'm like, yeah, during lunchtime. I'm curious to see what'll happen. He's like, well, that's right in the middle of the work week. Like, how are you going to manage that? And what about work and all this stuff? I'm like, I don't know. I'm going to work from 9 a.m. till 11, and then I'm going to take 2 hours, go to the gym, and we'll see how it works. And my productivity level, what I noticed was I was more focused. I was making more use of time, but I was also happier. I was taking care of my body, and that was just one step, right? And so I mean, that's a big way of how it's shaped my life. It's shaped my conversations with clients and the things that, I mean, this is the reason why why we're even having this conversation, right? My life changed. My conversations with clients started changing. I see their lives becoming more aligned, and I want to work with more people like that. So I'm having a lot more of these alignment conversations, folks who, to them, it's not all about wealth. It's about, purpose-driven. It's about creating a meaningful legacy. And the more and more I'm having these conversations, the more I'm enjoying it. And I keep wondering, is there an audience of people out there, people that may be wondering, are there more people that think the way that I do? And the answer is yes. So that's what I'm kind of hoping to achieve with this, is letting them know that you're not alone. there's more people.
Right on.
Yeah.
I love this, and thank you so much for sharing this. I'm glad I could ask you a question too. I just want to spell out something that we're not saying. We're not saying, prioritize everything but work and just be lazy.
Right.
And, we're actually saying, when you prioritize what matters, it's value first, you will become increasingly more productive, more inspired. And when you're more productive and more inspired, you'll create better work.
Right.
It will take you less time, and you'll meet, higher vibrating people. You'll meet people that are in alignment with where you're going.
Yeah.
And so this is a very important reframe, because, one of the few times I actually worked in an office, this was in Victoria, Victoria, British Columbia, in 2015 or 16 or something, at a stretch for like a year and a half, where I worked with a startup, and the office culture was so lazy and so slow. Lots of water cooler conversations, lots of just spinning wheels for spinning wheels. Where I'm like, why am I here for 7, 8, 9 hours every single day, just so that everyone sees that I'm here? I could literally do the work in like an hour a day. And that environment, despite its labels of wanting to be very conscious, actually wasn't operating on a conscious level. And so it took me a while to realize that, and ultimately had to move on. But realizing it was not a loss. It was a huge win for me, because it allowed me to understand, okay, this is where I'm just not going to cut corners anymore. I'm not even going to say yes to an opportunity that happens there. And so, that means I'll now have to be even more inspired, and it means I have to, trust the next window of opportunity and just unapologetically jump forward, right? And so that's really what we're speaking about. It's committing out of a conviction that your values are sacred and that you can live in an inspired state longer and more often.
Right.
And so, for a lot of people, that does mean they love their work. I know a lot of people that love their work, and that is amazing, right? But those people also love time with their family. They also love going to the events on the weekend. They also love what they do in their free time. It's because if you're switched on and inspired, you'll be switched on and inspired across the board.
Yeah.
And so that's really what we're talking about here.
And we're getting to something that well, here, let me ask you this first. Can that be learned? Is that something that can be learned? I mean, we're talking about, I know that one of the things that we share in common, Julian, we've had a couple of conversations is, and I know there's a lot of us, a lot of people like us, in that we are constantly on this hunt for personal growth. And that maybe that's kind of a general term, but so I'm asking this question from a place of maybe there's somebody thinking to themselves, well, I don't know, this conversation seems like we're talking about spirituality a little bit. There's like, I don't really think that way. Like you said, I'm going to work, I feel okay. I'm kind of prioritizing work. I make good money. I have a good life, but can somebody learn how to find this, what we're kind of saying from my life? You have a much more articulate way of expressing this, but a more regenerative way of living, a more meaningful way.
Right. I love the question. The short answer is yes, it can be learned, period. Right. The longer answer is, yeah, we could go there through the lens and the angle of spirituality, or we can go there through the lens and the angle of science. If we go there through the lens and the angle of science, it's very simple. About 90% of our daily actions are governed and run by our subconscious. This is a known fact of science of the last 30 to 50 years. It's still pretty cutting edge in some ways of looking at it. And so what that really means is our subconscious gets programmed between the ages 0 to 7. So wherever you grew up, whatever the dominant energy was during 0 to 7, that's what sets your operating system. Now, some of the subconscious program is, of course, beneficial to how your life operates, right? Like, I'm glad I don't have to think of every single breath I'm taking, even though, I love breathing and breath work and yoga and all of these things. So I love being aware of my breathing, but I'm also so glad that some functions of the body happen subconsciously. The problem with the subconscious is, let's take a scenario where you grew up in an abusive household, or you grew up in money scarcity, or you grew up in a world where you had to look out and watch your back. Now you're going to bring those subconscious programs into every day of your life for the rest of your life. And most people, they don't have the time to actually ever get aware of it, but we can change and reprogram the subconscious. Now, there's a whole bunch of brainwave science that I'm not going to explain right now that,
Sure.
You can look up, either Google it or ask ChatGPT, or, look up Bruce Lipton. He's a genius at explaining this. Actually had the pleasure of interviewing him a few years ago. So there's a rabbit hole of information about the subconscious mind and how to reprogram it. In short, though, one of the most effective ways to reprogram the subconscious is deliberate repetition, right? That's what athletes do. That's what musicians do. Like, think of your favorite musician. The song you see them perform on stage, they performed the song thousands of times. They've practiced it thousands of times. They don't just show up and riff and they're like, I'm amazing. Thanks for being here, everyone. No, they do deliberate reps. They do deliberate repetition, right? And so to change our mindset, like all of coaching, all of personal development, right, is money systems or mindset systems. We can literally cut it down to those two pillars. They're either money systems to help you make more money, or mindset systems to have a different relationship with yourself and the world around you, so you can be more present and more activated. And so what I actually do with people, myself, either in one-on-ones or in groups, is I have this 40-day resilience program that actually is a stack of changing your breath, changing your focus, and changing your energy on a daily basis. And if you do this for 40 days, every day, 10 to 20 minutes daily, guaranteed you will slowly change your vantage point of how you see reality. You'll slowly reprogram, rewire your subconscious mind. But then also, it just never stops. Only because I've done this once, I'm not going to stop doing it for the rest of my life, because this is what it means to be, you kind of call it like obsessed with growth, obsessed with personal development. I think it's natural that we keep expanding. Just like you said earlier, or we said earlier, purpose changes over life. You might have a different purpose at 20 than you have at 60, right? Your reason for being, the French call it raison d'être, or the Japanese ikigai, like your purpose, it might change, and that's okay, right? But it's not so much working on yourself because you're broken, it's uncovering how brilliant you actually are. That's what personal development is about. I actually want to bust a personal development myth here, Miguel.
Please.
The myth is that you always have to hustle harder, do the newest trend, and if you just do more of what everyone else does on the Instagram, then you'll also get there. Well, in short, people are talking shit. 50% or more of personal development is about learning to accept who you already are. Right. When you wake up, when you look in the mirror, when you go to bed, when you're brushing your teeth, when you look in the mirror, who do you see? Can you spend time alone with yourself? Do you actually do it? Who are you without your cell phone? Like, remember 25 years ago when none of us had cell phones? Like, accepting who we are at the core is a huge part of personal development. And then we can stack things on top. But they don't come without the other, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. There was a lot there. And I mean, the way I'm kind of receiving that is, it seems like in order the how-to, right? If I'm in a place where maybe I am feeling like, okay, this resonates with me. I'm not where I need to be. Maybe I'm not fully happy. Maybe I'm successful, but I'm not fully happy. I just read an article. There's I think it was a Google employee a couple of weeks ago that died. Going into the office. I forget, it was like 10 o'clock at night. He was reported dead around 2 a.m. the next morning. I mean, just what is it all worth, right? So what I'm thinking about is, in order to, the part of the how-to is, well, step one is we need to be in this place of, we need to give ourselves an opportunity. Maybe it's clearing our minds. And put in other words, it's almost like gaining awareness. Being able to gain awareness of those. Go ahead.
Yeah, and it's great where you're going, but I'm just also seeing the chat. I just discovered the chat for the first time here. So it's gaining awareness. Awareness is always step one. You're totally spot on. But then from awareness, it's about creating concrete steps, again, that turn into a habit, right? But think of sports. Like any top performer in sports, they don't just play the games. They practice every single day of their life. That's why their muscle memory knows how to do every single move in every single game, right? And think of a musician. Think of any performing arts, actually. They have performance days, they have practice days, and then they have rest days.
Right.
Literally, performing artists have rest days, because it's known that if you were to sing every day at full tilt, eventually your voice is going to sound, not as amazing. And so it's about awareness, it's about rhythm, and it's about creating concrete actions and habits that are, they don't have to be always only enjoyable, but that are enjoyable for you. We came from how you want to live first. So, for me, that means daily practice. In yoga, it's called sadhana. And in one way or other, I'm going to show up for anything between 10 minutes to an hour, usually in the morning, sometimes at night. Every now and then I miss it. I'm not going to get down on myself for it. But that's just what works for me. That's what on my path uniquely has lit up for me. For different people, it might be different. But what is the same for all of us is every day is a new day. Every day you got to get into that zone where you feel like, I'm ready. I'm ready for anything that's coming at me today. And not ready to fight, but ready to play with it, ready to mold that clay into some kind of a statue, ready to make something amazing out of it. And if you don't feel that way, I'm pretty sure you'd like to feel that way. right? Because this is even in the constitution of this country, the pursuit of happiness. It's a real thing. It's a real thing. I mean, we all want to be closer to bliss. We all want to be closer to whatever we call the great mystery, you know?
And that pursuit of happiness could be interpreted in a lot of different ways. Like, what does it actually mean to have happiness, and what does it mean to be in the pursuit? While I was hearing you talk, I was thinking about a book. It's called Peak Performance, but it talks about athletes as well. Same thing, just like the performing artists. Athletes are known. They train. We think of like Olympians or NFL players or basketball, training on a daily basis. But the reality is they take several days, sometimes a week or two, where they do absolutely nothing. What they're allowing to happen is muscle growth, regeneration. How that translates for me into the mind is, you said for different people, it could come in different ways. For you, it's maybe meditation and yoga. For somebody else, it could be much more practical. It could just be believing in God and maybe praying every night. And so what's in common for me, because for me, breath work is really important, but it's creating this space where we have this ability to be able to reflect back on what happened, how we're doing, what's going to happen, being, like you said, being ready to show up, not to fight, but to be curious. I think there's two things that I found in life that have really kind of helped in this process of putting life first, which is what we eventually want to get to here. And that's finding curiosity and joy and fun, right? Being curious about things. If shit hits the fan, well, let's be curious about it. What went wrong? Let's have a little fun and see, and maybe replaying this back a different way. What could have done differently? I was reading this book by David Data, and it was asking this question, and you're nodding. I think you know him well. There's a question that he asks is, are you living at your edge? Are you giving your fullest gifts? Is there a different way you can show up and even earn money more creatively than how you're doing now? Or is this, and I'm kind of paraphrasing in my own words, is this the best you got? And when I answered that question, when I read that the first time, my answer was no. I'm not giving my fullest gifts. I'm not living as most creative. I
love that. Let me just insert something there. Now, knowing you and knowing that you have a successful business that you're operating, you living at your edge might not mean that you have to leave that behind and just start a whole new thing. It might mean that somewhere in your life you want to turn up the volume and get closer to the edge. Maybe there's not enough adrenaline and adventure in your life, so you want to make sure you have a week or two a year where you're only in the pursuit of adventure and you're on your edge, so you have that steady, that powerful client-facing energy when you need to show that, right? It's not only about work or free time. It's about finding these different aspects. Like, all of us are complex personalities, right? And all of us are multifaceted. And to a degree, we live in a world where we're told we're one thing and then you're locked into that forever. That's not the case. No. Things change. Things light us up. Things don't light us up. So finding that, I think, is very important. And if I may, you're going to go somewhere. You go there. I have something else. Yeah.
No, I mean, you're absolutely. I mean, what I was thinking about was just how that must show up for those of us who, and I'm not sitting on this whatever you call it platform as though this is law or anything. I don't think either of us kind of claim to be. But I guess what I'm trying to say is for those of us that have kind of been on this path of, and now we're engaging with people both in business and in our personal lives, there's almost like a reflection thing happening where we can identify things in other people that they may not see themselves because we've either gone through it ourselves, right? It's one of those things where know yourself and know others, right? Mm-hmm. For me, one of the ways that's shown up is there's, if I had $1 for every time I've heard this, especially when I'm working with business owners, it's this phrase: if I could just get to this next fill in the blank, then
Once I get there, then I will.
Once I get there. And mind you, they've already built the business. They've already bought the house. They've already maybe sold the business successfully and started another one. They're probably on their fourth or fifth venture, and they're still saying, I could just get to this next. And so it always brings me back to, who do they have in their corner that is asking them the one question nobody else is? What for?
Yeah, that's a big one, man. I'm actually going to take a note myself, because I love that one so much. I've said it many times, and I'm gonna have to make a video on it. But once I get there, then I will. Right? You're right. And so I think coaching and advising people for the last eight plus years, but I have coaches and people in my corner all the time. I hire help all the time. And it's not because they have things figured out in a way I don't have. It's because the reflection point and knowing there are people in my corner and knowing I have allies that help keep me accountable, that help keep me, in check or relatable or of integrity. It just helps. We're better together as people, And so that's really, I mean, what an amazing point to bring up, Miguel, because so many people operate from the once I get there, then I will. Well, eventually we all pass away, so that's kind of too late to let go of that one.
Or even worse, well, maybe not worse, or more realistically, we do get there, and then what?
And then what?
Yeah.
Right. And so that's all about coming back to the present moment, and which is why, that's the one thing I wanted to throw in. I wanted to give a very, very concrete opportunity to do what I call the relationship audit, So all freedom and all happiness through my lens has to do with the relationships and the people in your life. The people we give access to our energy, our vision, our mission, the friends, the family, the colleagues that are in our life. So relationship freedom, to me, seems to be the highest degree of freedom. And so my question for everyone who's tuned in, right, is just think about something very simple. What is one relationship in your life, whether it's business, it's an employee, it's a client, maybe even with your own internal voice, right? What is one relationship in your life that actually has a draining effect on your energy? Now, probably the person already lit up, because most all of us have that. But what would change if you had the courage to address that relationship directly this week? What would change if you could lean in and have the difficult conversation of either reconciling something that was said, of, maybe creating a boundary, or of just being very honest, right? What becomes possible? Last thing I'm going to say about that, most people don't ever do that because they're avoiding difficult conversations. They prefer to play a game in the front end and then go to someone else and complain about the person. I'll just say it nice and short. Stop talking shit. Like, it's just never going to get you anywhere. High performers don't go around talking shit about others. They just don't. They don't need to. They take that same energy and create with.
Yeah.
Right. But then specifically, when you dare to have a difficult conversation, it doesn't even matter what changes. Just by the act of having the courage, I guarantee you, your life will change. And I'm not telling you go out there and be rude to someone. I'm telling you, identify it, act on it, and learn to do so kindly.
Yeah. And you're right. I mean, that's a huge one, because I mean, how much space does that? And if we're really being honest with ourselves, when we think about those people who kind of invade that space in our minds and our hearts, we can sit here and say, well, I'm getting along just fine, and I'm still being productive. I'm still, but you asked a question, and I'll say it again: is what could happen if that changed? So imagine where you are now. And what kind of improvement can that make in your life? And I've been there. And if nothing else, I mean, the biggest thing that I got from that, and I'll share that with people, is it was really learning how to have those difficult conversations, because it wasn't easy. I had to have a really difficult conversation with somebody very close to me that was a very close friend, but also very closely tied together with me for business. And it was a really tough conversation. One that I just wasn't very skilled at. So, I mean, I had to dress it by rehearsing and practicing it. But man, from that point forward, it taught me that I could deal with those situations anytime that it comes up, but really approach it from a place of maturity, love, and care, not from a, hey, look, asshole, like this is how I, this isn't aligned with me.
Intention really matters, right? Even if you're not skilled at the conversation. This is a great example, Miguel. Like, thanks for sharing that. But intention really matters. The other person can feel your energy before they listen to your words anyway. That's true for every interaction in this world. Your intention is a felt experience on the other side.
Absolutely. I want to end with a question that's really just tied to the whole theme of this series. And by the way, I'm calling it a series. I mentioned this to you. I was kind of hesitant calling this a podcast, even though it feels like a podcast, because that then feels like I have to continue going. And we just talked about how, sometimes you pursue something and you fulfill it, and then you want to move on to the next thing. I don't know how long this is going to exist, so I'm calling it a limited series because I feel like at some point I'm going to get to a point where I feel like I've fulfilled what I needed to fulfill with these conversations.
I love it.
But one question that I want to ask, and we'll end with this, is what does life first mean to you in relation to wealth and building a legacy? You're a parent now, so you have a business, you have a family. What does life first mean to you? And what has focusing on life first, life meaning love and compassion and intention and people, what has that done for you?
I love that question. Two things come up in parallel when you ask that. One is life first means here and now. We can't take anything for granted. We don't know about tomorrow. It's always going to be here and now. And even when we get to tomorrow, it's going to be here and now. So can I show up here and now from the values and with the love that I want to receive and that I want to see in the world? Sometimes it's harder, sometimes it's easier, but that's my pursuit. The pursuit is to be true, to lead with love, and to lead with clarity, to lead with integrity. And life first comes back to relationship, and so they experience relationships. We experience relationship freedom in each here and now. The second stream that comes up for me is a little bit meta, but what are the consequences of my actions for my son's world, for my grandchildren's world? An indigenous piece of wisdom that really stuck with my heart over the last years is, what about 7 generations into the future? Because most of us don't realize that, but we are a product of what happened the last 7 generations.
Yeah.
I mean, we stand on the shoulders of giants. You drive a car every day. Not all of us know how to even build such a machine. We use the computer, but we just take it for granted. So it's something that's being created through the effort of people that came before us. And so what about the people that come after us? Life first also means protecting what is sacred about life, which is, relationships, but also the relationship to the planet. So for me, that means clean drinking water and, healthy soil, primarily, because I don't want to get lost in any of the buzzwords about a healthy planet. I just think drinking water and soil quality on this planet are a fundamental right of being born on this planet that I want to pass on to any generation that follows. And so it's very meta and very big, but just being aware that relationship matters to me has brought me into some very interesting constellations and projects over the last years. And I just feel very blessed for it. So that's my roundabout answer. Thanks for that big question. But if you still have the time, I'd love to hear your answer.
I mean, I don't know if I could answer that better than you did. I mean, and this is exactly why I wanted to start with you, is the way you answered that. I mean, and this was not rehearsed, but the way you answered that is exactly to to the T almost of what I thought about wealth first. It's about one thing we did not say when we're talking about what life first means is it doesn't mean not pursuing wealth. It doesn't mean not leaving money behind to our kids. It doesn't mean limiting ourselves. It's the complete opposite. It's what life first to me means is being able to approach, again, in relation to the work that I do in my world, being able to approach building wealth, and wealth in its multi-definitional meaning, right? Values, systems, traditions, love, joy, and happiness, as well as money and numbers and all of those things. But being able to approach that from a point of view where we are being pulled by something as opposed to having to push ourselves consistently, like you were in the corporate world. You probably had to push yourself every day to show up to that job that you didn't want to be in. That's where the grind and hustle culture comes in. Rise and shine, it's 5 o'clock in the morning. Let's get out and let's make it happen, right? But when we approach life from a life first standpoint, and we have a value system, we have something that we're pursuing that's greater than ourselves, it pulls us in the direction that we want to go. And it doesn't require us to simply rely on willpower to get there. And I think that's powerful. And you could build amazing things. And I know that's something you're working, that you're able to now do. That shows up in the work that you do with your clients, and all of that. I know we're at the top of the hour, but Julian, this has been so much fun, and I think there was a lot of lessons here that I'm definitely going to walk away with. So thank you so much for doing this with me, and I hope we get to do this again.
Miguel, it was a lot of fun. It flew by. Let's for sure do this again. If you'd have me back, I'd happily come back. But I want to speak a compliment to you for daring to create the space for those dialogues, not knowing what you're in for, not knowing how long you're going to do it, not knowing who's listening, but just that you're creating the space for the dialogue is creating ripples of impact.
Right.
And so just, kudos to you. Congratulations. And thank you for today.
Thank you. Bye-bye.